I just read a kidnapping fantasy romance that I actually liked. Generally, I don't really like kidnapping because anytime there's a romance involved, I just think Stockholm Syndrome and I cannot get on board with that. But this one's an exception. And it is spicy AF. So if you want some spice in your life, I definitely recommend this. So I think what it is that's the key to me is that there has to be like a strong female love interest who isn't dismissive of the actions that the dude did with kidnapping her. And there also has to be a moment where the guy sees the error of his ways, but also they have to have a clear motivation for kidnapping them in the first place that's not completely selfish. And this book nailed doing all of those things. So when it got to the sexy time, it felt very consensual. And so I was able to get on board and highly enjoy that. So if you've been wanting to read a little bit of a darker fantasy with the kidnapping in there that you can get on board with that doesn't feel like Stockholm Syndrome, then I definitely recommend this. So he joins a war, and I'm not going to give you any like huge spoilers. He joins a war with the rest of his dragon kind in order to take down the princess's kingdom. And they need to do this because there's been a plague on his land, which means that there's not as much livestock anymore. And so they need this other island. So they negotiate with this king who will give them the island if they help him in the war. So they help out in the war. This is like the first chapter. So again, it's a big, huge twist. So if you want to go in completely blind, go ahead and leave this video, but I am going to give you a little more context for like the opening chapters only. And I think it's in the blurb as well. So there's a sorcerer who winds up giving his life in order to pull off this spell that takes out all of the female dragons, which means that the dragons can no longer procreate. There will be the end of dragons. And so he loses his sister and like his grandma and the person that he was supposed to be with. All of those people cease to be. And so he's like, we're going to seek revenge now. We're going to go steal some women from the enemy territory. And we're just going to take them because we don't have dragons anymore. So we're going to procreate with them. Well, they're in dragon form at this point. They don't look like the guy right here. They have no human attributes whatsoever when they steal these women. And so then these got to figure out how in the world are they going to give birth because the anatomy does not match up at all. And so he steals the daughter of the sorcerer who pulled off the huge spell. And so she decides to do a spell, but instead of making the women dragons like he wanted to happen, she makes the dragons become like shapeshifters, and then they take on this humanesque form that you see here. And they're super attractive, and mating season is coming, and they only do mating season like once every 25 years, and that's when they birth their dragons and all of that. Also in the Dragon Society, it is like a matriarch. So when it comes to the taking care of the children and stuff like that, it's the man's responsibility, not the woman's. So I love when there's role reversals like that kind of give women a little bit more of their agency and power back. I also like that this story is inclusive in the fact that even though these dragons, like mating is a huge thing for them and procreation is a huge thing, they're also like a gay couple that's in here, so you can choose anyone. It doesn't have to be like male-female pairing, and it even references some like polyamorous relationships or where someone mated with more than one partner. So it's very inclusive in that way. She is sassy. He is a bit brooding. They're having to learn each other's culture, and it is an enemies to lovers romance for sure, but there is like also that like instant sexual attraction once he has a human form. And honestly, even before he has the human form, there is a little bit of the dragon hanky panky style that's not fully what you would think, because like she would die from that, but like she goes there. So if you want to have like a monster romance type element, you're definitely going to get that in this story. Other than the enemies to lovers thing that's going on in the romance, this is definitely a romance centered fantasy story with dragons and humans. It is also very isolated pretty much to the two characters. So if you really like the romance to take up the majority of the story, you're going to get it here. But that does not mean that there is not some plots going on other than the romance elements, because there is. And the ending, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but the ending I was not expecting. I was under the impression this was going to be a standalone. It kind of is, in that it resolves like the romantic arc, but then the last chapter like introduces this new thing and you're like, oh, I have to read the next book, which is not out yet. So yeah, read this book and then be ready in September for the second book to release. I am excited. It is on KU, so you can definitely go try it out there if you have that. But yeah, go read this book, Serpents of Sky and Flame by Rebecca Kinney. And let me know if you enjoyed it too. How do you feel about kidnapping romances? Do you have other recommendations where they nail the elements that I talked about, where it feels very consensual once the hanky-panky begins? As far as the spice rating with this, I would say there is definitely some variety that's in there, and there's definitely multiple sexy scenes. So I've got to give it above a 3 on the spice scale. But I would say I would stick with like a 4 for the spicy peppers, because there could have been more variety with the different acts. This is because my standards have went like crazy because of the Colorado Bulldogs, and there was like 50 different types of sex scenes, and I was like, how do you have this much variety? So yeah, but this one is like a 4 out of 5 spicy, and I read some books that are like, they're the spicy romance, but I'm like, that's like a 2 spicy pepper. This is like a 4 spicy pepper. So go get it. Just go do it, and then come back here and let me know what you think.